So this is the inaugural episode of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast from London within quotes UK only on the internet, not on satellite or terrestrial platforms. And this is the daily world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Fleet Street is also known as the British newspapers that based at London addresses that historically used to be only in Fleet Street or nearby streets in central London. EC, East Central London, that is in the actual city of London, that is the boundary of the city of London, what is otherwise known as the square mile, which is a misleading term in every respect. The city of London is not the city of London. To those who don't live in London, they don't know the UK, the word city is actually only one very small part of the metropolitan city of London. And Fleet Street used to be the address for most of the papers, including especially the Times and the Borisgraph, that is the Telegraph, and even the Sun and the Daily Mail. And the Financial Times was situated slightly away from the actual Fleet Street, and it was near the location of what is called the Cathedral, St. Paul's Cathedral in central London. St. Paul's Cathedral faces towards Fleet Street, about within half a mile of St. Paul's Cathedral. So, but the reason we call this diagnosis of Fleet Street, the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, is literally to be taken as the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, because we don't just repeat or refer to some of the contents of the headlines in the papers that are collectively known as Fleet Street. So the ones that we regularly look at least 6 days of the week, are the following. The Daily Borisgraph, and we shall explain again for anyone looking at this or viewing this program for the first time. This is what is called officially, and we call it Borisgraph because of its criminal role in falsely peddling and promoting the image of the congenital liar Boris Johnson, whom the recent owners of the Borisgraph, the Barclay brothers, have bribed to the tune of several £million over the last, 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, 13 years, at least, since Johnson became incumbent in the corrupt post of the mayor at the expense of London. And the pack of lies that the Fleet Street papers constitute together is evident in the facts, even before we go to the headlines. The facts of this one. This is the newest kind of edition. It's a very recent one in historical terms, and it's called the I newspaper, which came into existence as part of an experiment by the group that owned the Independent, which is no longer printed but is available only online. And this was the offshoot. But as compared to the sales of the Independent, the sales were plummeting. This one, the I, became quite a successful sale, and it became commercially viable. And then it is now owned separately by separate owners. And at the beginning, when it became the kind of successful part of the group that owned the Independent, it had pretensions, or it had kind of liberal pretensions, to the extent that it became almost more liberal than the Guardian's pretentious existence and role. But in the last year or so, this I newspaper has become right-wing, more right-wing than the Independent. Can you imagine? This is the right-wing one, and that is why it is running this heading today, Wednesday, the 26th of May, 2021. And it is a corrupt, completely corrupt headline or heading. It has got a contradictory kind of two parts. One is that number 10 cancels accidental lockdowns. That is covering up the lies and the contradictions and the unfitness for purpose kind of behavior by Johnson's fronted cabal. That the lockdowns were not really intended to be lockdowns. How stupid can that be? How stupid and completely idiotic. I mean, lockdown is not a joke, but they are treating it as a joke, as an accidental joke as well. So they're saying that number 10 is not to be blamed for the lockdowns that are not supposed to be in place. And they're not even to be kind of blamed on anybody else. Accidental. It is like the ghost of Narendra Modi from India has been surfacing invisibly in areas of England, spreading the Indian variant virus and forcing local lockdowns. So Modi is a liar, Johnson is a liar, and the Fleet Street I newspaper is a liar as well. We shall go back to discussing the extent of the latest lies by Modi. And this liar, Oliver Duff, is the current liar editor of this stupid lying I newspaper. And it is following the same directive, the same agenda, the same kind of script that must have been circulated to all of Fleet Street, including to week. Because this private eye, which is officially dated 2 days from now, that is Friday, this is Wednesday, so 2 days earlier it is circulated, available to the dedicated kind of collectors and investigators. So we have to have access to this one on Wednesday. So this one is supposed to carry a critical kind of section called the Street of Shame. We call it Fleet Street, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, but they call it Street of Shame, and they pretend to be critical of the lies and deceptions and fraud prevalent in the Fleet Street papers. But they don't do that because none of the coverage in the eye, as we have been saying, in the private lie about Fleet Street's lying and dishonesty has resulted in or led to the prosecution of any of the Fleet Street liars. Now, on the objective definition of crime and criminality and deception and fraud, we assert, we don't just believe, but we assert that every week, at least every week, if not every day, the Fleet Street papers commit a crime or a number of crimes that warrant being prosecuted for lying, falsification, deception, false information, and all the rest of it. But that never happens. And the fact that that never happens exposes this country or the UK, or what remains of the UK, to the fact-based, evidence-based charge that it has no government really, and it has no democracy, and it has no judiciary, there is no due process, nothing. It's a miracle that it exists and it continues. And the other thing that we have been pointing out on the Twitter relates to the body language antics of the liar, congenital liar, Boris Johnson. When we say body language, we refer to the various antics that he stages, various kind of appearances, and when he appears before cameras, he makes gestures, including some of the notorious ones where he was sitting in a container being carried on an electronic kind of cable. These are visual gimmicks. But when these are presented without the explanations that these are gimmicks and these are not genuine, and that Boris Johnson is intentionally lying, falsifying the actual truth by appearing to be doing something rigorous, these images and these kind of motion pictures, if you like, and the videos convey the wrongest possible impression to the gullibles. And the gullibles are the majority of the population who go for the lies for Brexit and vote for Brexit, only to find that they've been conned. And these gullibles keep getting conned perpetually. Every few years, every now and then, the British crooks in British politics perpetrate a con or a series of cons to manipulate and to hoodwink and to mislead the gullibles into voting for the latest wrongs. But the gullibles don't see that as the wrongs. The gullibles see those as the rights, as the opposite of the wrongs. And Boris Johnson is the embodiment of the lying and the hoodwinking. And so therefore this front page cover is a falsification, because he is pictured here as walking in front of Dominic Cummings. But the reality is that most of the times that Cummings was in post as the advisor to Johnson, Cummings was actually almost kind of routinely reported as being the leader and Johnson as the lead.